Air Canada is charting a bold new course, and Donald Trump's destructive tariff war is the catalyst driving this transformation. While Trump's punishing economic policies drive Canadians away from U.S. destinations in record numbers, Canada's flag carrier is plotting an ambitious expansion that completely sidesteps traditional American markets. We're talking 3 new seasonal routes to underserved U.S. cities, but here's the twist. Air Canada isn't banking on Canadian travelers anymore. Instead, they're positioning themselves to capture American passengers fleeing to Europe and Asia through Canadian hubs, a strategic masterstroke that turns Trump's own trade war against him. So what exactly is Air Canada building? And why is this expansion happening now when U.S.-Canada relations have hit their lowest point in decades? To understand this strategic pivot, we need to examine how Trump's confrontational approach to international relations has fundamentally altered North American travel patterns. His rhetoric at international forums has become increasingly confrontational, making clear that America stands alone on many global issues while doubling down on grievances not only domestically but against the rest of the world.
Well, I don't think it should be any surprise to many in terms of the tone that we saw from the president. This was a speech that was extremely confrontational. It also made clear that not only is MAGA America first, but it makes clear that the United States is willing and does stand alone on many of the global issues. This was a speech where the president, again, continued to double down on grievances, not only domestically, but against the rest of the world. And I think today, the world took notice of not only where the president stands, but more importantly, where he's taking the country.
This isolation strategy extends far beyond mere words. At the United Nations, Trump delivered what many described as his most aggressive attack yet on multilateral cooperation, calling it the greatest con job ever perpetrated on the world, while dismissing UN climate predictions as being made by stupid people who have cost countries fortunes.
U.S. President Donald Trump delivered a wide-ranging speech today before the United Nations General Assembly. In it, he called climate change the greatest con job ever perpetrated on the world.
The carbon footprint is a hoax. No more global warming, no more global cooling. All of these predictions made by the United Nations and many others, often for bad reasons, were wrong. They were made by stupid people that have cost their countries fortunes and given those same countries no chance for success. If you don't get away from this green scam, your country is going to fail. And I'm really good at predicting things, you know. They actually said during the campaign they had a hat, the best-selling hat. Trump was right about everything. And I don't say that in a braggadocious way, but it's true.
Should Trump's position on climate change dictate how this country proceeds with its climate agenda? Let's bring back the power panel. Emily Nicolas, Supriya Dwivedi, Peter MacKay, and Cheryl Oates. Supriya, I'll start with you on this one. Global warming, it's a hoax. I mean, we've heard the president talk about this before, but this seemed like another level when it comes to him denigrating the climate change fight, right?
But Trump's assault on international cooperation goes even deeper, describing uncontrolled migration as the #1 political problem facing Western nations, and accusing the UN of sponsoring an invasion and funding an assault on Western countries.
Railing as much against climate change and green action, which the United Nations does quite a bit of work to promote among its members, but also on immigration, specifically on migration, saying that the United Nations was created new problems. He called uncontrolled migration the #1 political problem, said that they were sponsoring an invasion into Western nations, funding an assault on Western nations. Those were the words that Donald Trump used when he was discussing migration. He came back to that theme repeatedly throughout the hour or so that he was speaking there. It was, alongside with climate action, the two repeated elements that he spoke about. And this was a steadfast rejection of the work that the UN does.
This rhetoric has poisoned diplomatic relations so thoroughly that former Canadian UN Ambassador Louise Blais recently revealed Republicans now view Canada and the United States as 2 ships passing in the night, without establishing the rapport needed for successful negotiations.
I think it already has. I think it speaks to the trust, the relationship. I was in D.C. just 2 weeks ago, and I heard it from many Republicans that there's this sense that we're two ships passing in the night, that we're not speaking the same language, and that we haven't succeeded in establishing the kind of relationship with the administration that could lead to a deal. And we heard, I know I'm criticized for saying this often, but we heard the president say it today, and that's just a fact. And we know he said he doesn't like to do business with people that he doesn't get along with. He said it in a speech. So for him, it's personal. You've got to build rapport. And from there, well, you do negotiate and try to get something out of it. That comes first with Donald Trump. And we get the sense that we're just not there yet.
The deterioration began in February 2025, when Trump's tariff threats first materialized into economic warfare. Air Canada's Vice President of Planning and Scheduling, Alexandre Lefebvre, had already outlined the airline's plan to add as many as 15 new U.S. airports to grow connectivity over its hubs. But what seemed like routine expansion planning suddenly became something far more strategic when Trump's 25% tariffs on Canadian goods triggered the biggest trade war between the two countries since the 1930s. The numbers tell a devastating story of Trump's policy failures. Canadian travel to the United States has plummeted by unprecedented margins. Automobile travel down 33% in June alone, air travel declining 22% year over year for 6 consecutive months, and same-day excursions falling by over 40%. This isn't just a temporary dip, it's a fundamental shift in Canadian consumer behavior that's reshaping the entire North American travel landscape. New polling reveals that 64% of Canadians believe Trump would break any trade deal with Canada, with anti-Americanism reaching its highest point in a generation.
I'm not seeing it so far.
All right, let's stay on the topic of Trump, but just switch gears a little bit. There's new polling that suggests Canadians have little faith that U.S. President Donald Trump would honor any trade deal once one is actually reached. According to Polera, 64% of Canadians say Trump would break a trade deal with Canada, while just 25% expect Trump will respect it. So, Priya, I'm actually surprised it's only 64.
Yeah, so am I.
I'm like, that doesn't sound so bad. It's pretty good for Trump. No, but speaking to the larger issue, I mean, there's clearly there's been, the relationship is on shaky ground, and Canadians are saying, even if you cut a deal with this guy, we don't trust he's going to follow it.
Yeah, there's been a real vibe shift from Trump 1.0 to Trump 2.0, I suppose. But yeah, I mean, look, I'm surprised that only 64% don't actually believe the president. I would have figured that number to be higher given everything that's transpired. Like, the whole reason we have a renegotiated deal in the first place is because Trump wanted to tear up NAFTA to get to Kuzma, and now he wants something different again. So his word does mean absolutely nothing. I don't know why we pretend otherwise, or that there's some sort of grand Trumpian strategy at play here, because the only consistent strategy or ethos with this administration is that Trump can do whatever he wants and act like a king, and the entire political establishment in America just watches while he does this, and the rest of the world.
Canadians are actively pulling back from U.S. goods and travel, creating unprecedented challenges for border states and tourism-dependent regions. But here's where Trump's tariff strategy completely backfires. While he intended to pressure Canada into submission, his policies have instead created a massive opportunity for Canadian airlines to capture American travelers. Air Canada's new routes to San Antonio, Cleveland, and Columbus aren't designed for Canadians fleeing U.S. destinations. They're designed for Americans seeking better connections to international markets through Canadian hubs. This is what aviation experts call sixth freedom traffic: passengers who originate in one country, transit through a second, and arrive in a third. For Air Canada, this means flying Americans from mid-sized U.S. cities to Europe and Asia via Toronto, Montreal, and Vancouver. It's a strategy that turns Canada's geographic position into a competitive advantage, especially when American carriers are struggling with their own capacity constraints and route networks. The timing couldn't be more perfect for Air Canada's expansion. Trump's tariffs have created what economists are calling mutual vulnerability. While Canada loses some U.S. tourism revenue, American cities lose the economic benefits of Canadian visitors. But Air Canada's sixth freedom strategy allows them to profit from American travelers while avoiding dependence on the very Canadian market that Trump's policies have disrupted. Look at the specific routes Air Canada is launching in May 2026. Toronto to San Antonio operates 3 times weekly on an Airbus A220-300. while Montreal connects daily to both Cleveland and Columbus using Embraer E-175 aircraft. These aren't massive markets, but they're exactly the kind of underserved cities that lack strong hub airline presence, perfect for capturing connecting traffic to Air Canada's international network. The strategic brilliance becomes clear when you consider Air Canada's broader expansion plans. In June 2026, they're launching new flights to Palma de Mallorca and Catania, while resuming service to Budapest and Shanghai, routes that haven't operated since at least 2020. This isn't coincidental timing, it's a coordinated strategy to offer American travelers superior connectivity to destinations that U.S. carriers either don't serve or serve poorly. Meanwhile, Trump's tariff policies continue to escalate in ways that only strengthen Air Canada's position. The tariff started at 25% in February, then jumped to 35% by July, with threats of even higher rates if Canada doesn't comply with Trump's demands. But each escalation only drives more Canadians away from U.S. destinations, while making Canadian hubs more attractive to American travelers seeking international connections. The data reveals the full scope of Trump's policy disaster. Over half of Canadians who had planned U.S. trips in early 2025 changed their plans due to tariff announcements and political rhetoric. Air Canada, Flair, Porter, and WestJet have all cut U.S. routes in response to plummeting demand. But rather than surrender to Trump's pressure, Air Canada is using this crisis as an opportunity to fundamentally restructure its network strategy. This restructuring goes beyond just adding new routes. Air Canada is planning to grow transborder capacity by about 15% year over year in summer 2026, even as overall Canadian travel to the U.S. continues collapsing. This apparent contradiction makes perfect sense when you understand that Air Canada is shifting from serving Canadian leisure travelers to capturing American business and connecting passengers. The economic implications are staggering for American cities that depend on Canadian tourism. The U.S. Travel Association noted that Canadian tourists spent $20.5 billion in the United States in 2024, with just a 10% decline, potentially Elam, adding 14,000 American jobs. The actual decline is on pace to be much larger, creating massive economic damage in border states and tourism-dependent regions. But Trump's response reveals the fundamental weakness of his entire approach. Rather than acknowledging the economic damage his tariffs are causing to American communities, he's doubling down with even more aggressive measures. The White House has announced tariffs on pharmaceuticals, heavy trucks, and furniture, ranging from 30% to 100%, while threatening additional measures against any country that doesn't bend to American demands. This escalation strategy is exactly what Air Canada anticipated and planned for. By positioning themselves to serve American travelers rather than Canadian ones, they've effectively immunized their growth strategy against Trump's trade war. American passengers flying from Cleveland to Europe via Montreal don't care about U.S.-Canada political tensions. They care about convenient connections and competitive prices. The broader implications extend far beyond aviation. Canada has successfully pivoted its export markets away from the United States, with the United Kingdom becoming its second largest export destination after a 63% spike in trade. Canadian retailers report that sales of American products are down 15 to 20% on average, with some categories falling 50%. Meanwhile, domestic Canadian products are seeing increased demand as consumers actively avoid American brands. This economic decoupling represents a fundamental shift in North American integration that will persist long after Trump leaves office. The trust and economic relationships that took decades to build are being systematically destroyed by Trump's aggressive trade policies, creating opportunities for competitors like Air Canada to permanently capture market share from American companies. The strategic patience that Air Canada is demonstrating contrasts sharply with Trump's reactive, short-term thinking. While Trump focuses on immediate pressure tactics and political theater, Air Canada is building sustainable competitive advantages that will benefit them for years to come. Their new routes to secondary American cities create footholds in markets that American carriers have neglected, while their international expansion provides the connectivity that makes these routes profitable. Perhaps most importantly, Air Canada's strategy reveals how Trump's tariff policies are fundamentally counterproductive to American interests. Instead of strengthening American companies and forcing foreign competitors to retreat, the tariffs are creating opportunities for those competitors to tour American customers, and build stronger market positions. Air Canada's expansion into U.S. markets using American passengers as connecting traffic is the perfect example of how Trump's trade war is backfiring. The summer 2026 launch timeline for these new routes also reveals Air Canada's confidence that Trump's policies will continue creating opportunities rather than resolving disputes. Airlines typically plan their route networks 12 to 18 months in advance, meaning Air Canada is betting that the fundamental shifts in North American travel patterns will persist well into the future. This confidence appears well-founded given the broader trends in U.S.-Canada relations. Even if Trump's tariffs were completely eliminated tomorrow, the damage to consumer confidence and travel patterns would take years to repair. Air Canada is positioning itself to profit from this long-term disruption, while building relationships with American passengers who might never have considered Canadian carriers without the current crisis. The irony is devastating for Trump's political narrative. His tariff policies were supposed to demonstrate American strength and force other countries to negotiate from positions of weakness. Instead, they've created opportunities for foreign companies like Air Canada to expand their presence in American markets while serving American customers. Trump's trade war isn't making America great again. It's making Canadian airlines stronger and more competitive. As we watch this strategic chess match unfold, Air Canada's moves reveal the sophisticated thinking that Trump's crude tariff threats completely miss. While Trump focuses on short-term pressure and political posturing, Air Canada is building long-term competitive advantages that will outlast any single political administration. Their expansion into underserved American markets using connecting traffic represents exactly the kind of strategic thinking that successful companies employ when faced with disruptive political environments. The ultimate lesson here is that Trump's tariff policies are creating more problems than they solve, while providing opportunities for competitors to strengthen their market positions at American XB. NSE, Air Canada's strategic expansion is just one example of how Trump's trade war is backfiring, but it's a particularly clear illustration of why crude economic nationalism fails in a complex, interconnected global economy. Thanks for watching, and if you want to see how other industries are adapting to Trump's disruptive trade policies, be sure to subscribe for more analysis of how political decisions create unintended economic consequences.